Good morning, good afternoon. We are live again with our RiseFI virtual chat, and that is episode 13. Before we start, I point out that in the chat you can introduce yourself. You can share. You can share your LinkedIn profile, what you do, where you're based. I just have to switch the screen here for a second. Else I see myself with a slight lag. Second is we have created some polls asking your opinion about what you think, who owns the data, how an ecosystem should look like. I will read out the results of the polls later towards the end. As usual, you can ask questions, use the questions feature which we have here in the app at Swapcard. I will collect the questions and we'll ask then Damian in between. So, topic today is the European. Yes, I'm a citizen of Europe, as many of us. The data strategy they have and the AI white paper they have published just before Corona hit us, and that's why we never really discussed it. And just giving you an example, we all know the app TikTok by now. TikTok is an Instagram story feature from China, which is very popular, especially among young people. And they say, well, they take the picture of you, the facial profiling, all the data, this is going to China, they will work with this. So India started to ban this very successful app. So you can imagine that China has already banned a lot of European or American apps. Europe will one day say, well, Google Maps doesn't work anymore, or Google Search doesn't work. Facebook we can't. It has to be European Facebook. It has to be European Google Search. India is doing this. So we have a trend here that the open internet which we have, and it's wonderful, it's closing. And Damian, who's our guest today, he is one of the best people to speak about this. Second, European Union has decided to have a 750 billion restructuring fund for the corona crisis, etc. And Damian, who's our guest today, he is part of the budget committee, so he has some insights there too, and he's fighting for having a green, digital and sustainable investment into our future and not spending the money on something which is a waste. So, as I said, the guest is Damian Boeselager. He grew up in Frankfurt, he went to the army, which I think is something positive. Then he started philosophy and economy. And after his bachelor, he worked for McKinsey, I think 2 or 3 years, then returned to study his master in, I think, public administration here in business, and in New York. And there he was a little bit involved in Hillary Clinton's campaign. He experienced the Brexit then, and he experienced the Trump, not disaster, but the Trump, I think it's just a note in history. And from there, he was getting involved into political movement. And to make it short, he will tell us more. He started his own party, which is Volt, in 2017. And 2 years later, it's the first pan-European party, which means it's a party for whole of Europe. He was elected member of the parliament. And well, I think that's enough for now. Let me bring him online. Hello, Damian.
Hi. Thanks for the invitation.
Wonderful. So I've briefly touched it. You started your own party with a couple of other people. So you are not only the founder of a party, but also member of parliament. I think these are two cool things. And
thank you.
My question there is, how do you start a party? Because we discussed this for a company. You have a business plan and funding, but you never learn in business schools how to start a party or political movement.
It's a very good question. I didn't know it either. We fell a bit into it. You touched upon it, we were in 2016 in fall there, and we had all these news coming in. Brexit had just happened, as you said. Trump was getting elected. In Italy, actually, Renzi had to resign over a constitutional referendum, which was quite a big point for this friend of mine, the Italian guy, Andrea, who was really also a driving force of this. And also Marine Le Pen in France was getting very strong. I don't know if you remember, but she was ramping up her campaign against
Macron. She
was
very close to Macron at the end.
Exactly. And it was also the year before the AfD went into the German parliament with 88 seats. I think 90 in the beginning, but then they lost 2 or something like this. So I mean, like the time you can imagine was completely politicized, and I think we all remember that. And there was also Pulse of Europe. So I see you with the shirt, Citizens of Europe. I mean, there was a lot of that, a lot of flag waving. I think for the first time actually with European flags. And we were thinking, like, what do we do about this? Are we going to just, maybe think about another think tank so we can bring in good ideas? Should we? I mean, what can we do? Should we go with Pulse of Europe on the streets? And we thought, actually, if the issue is in politics, we should really go into politics. But that was, like the abstract idea.
Go to the core of the problem.
Exactly, go to the core of the problem. And then we realized that nobody wants to go into politics. Party sounds boring, and I mean, if it's not an actual party, but like a political party.
It's a career. I mean, I'm a member of a party out there. I have started with 14. I have seen all the processes, and it takes either luck or a very special character trait, or a lot of waiting until you get a position. The position you have, I would have to wait 20 to 30 years until all the people in line either resign or die.
Yeah, and that's not a very interesting prospect for people who I guess want to get active. Yeah. And that was, I think, also one of the issues that I realized more and more that I hope we can solve a bit with Boyd is that people are just not attracted to go into politics at all. I mean, as you said, like there's no, it's not a career dream for many people to do that. And I think it's sad because in the end, still parties put people on lists, and lists are getting elected, and will be the people in the end, who run our governments and who sit in the Bundestag and the European Parliament and all other parliaments.
So you are alone in the parliament for your party?
That's correct.
Which is, by the way, a good success to enter the parliament on the first attempt. So congratulations to this. We have seen it similar with the Pirates, and then it's they came up very fast and then they entered. And you're part of the Green fraction. Yes, if I can.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just maybe to make the connection between the beginning and now. I mean, how to build a party or a movement was quite an interesting thing to experience. So, like, what we did, we basically just posted, "Hey, do you want to join our movement?" and build up this tech infrastructure in the back that would instantly, bring people in, and then we would do interviews.
Community management first. So community management, and I would call community interaction. And what platform did you use, by the way, to involve them, that they feel they are part of something? I mean, it can't be physical all the time.
So we looked at the range of platforms for different things. I mean, we in the end we had a volunteer at some point who was a very good is a very good coder, and he built us the Ruby on Rails database that would allow us to basically manage the people who are coming in and instantly contact them and connect them with the local responsible person. So basically, you register, you instantly get an email from your local representative saying, like, "Hi, I'm I don't know, Max. do you want to chat and talk about this?" And I think that what was something that was also very important for me from the beginning is like the user experience of being in a party should be positive. You should feel like, hey, actually they want me. They're not just saying like, yeah, line up, as you said, in the end, and then let's see what comes out of it. But like, you should instantly have somehow the feeling of like, cool, they're well organized. The time matters for them. Like, I have a email by the person instantly. I have a phone call set up digitally very soon, and so on. So like, this was, I think, kind of important for us.
Where was this this point that you, between an idea and then what's the moment where you said you can't go back anymore, where this idea was so real that it's like, okay, now I have to execute this, at least until we win or not win, and then we see what happens? I mean, this was like, it's like taking it, it's more than taking a job, which you can cancel. You started a movement.
I think for me, that point came, 1 year in my master's, so like half a year after Volt started, I would say. I had to decide whether I change my plans and leave the US for the second year and go back to Berlin to finish basically my second year of my master in Berlin, which was possible in a partner university, but which was not my dream. I lived in Berlin for 7 years before. I just wanted to be in New York and like experience my life there, and like it was my dream. 2 years in New York, would I just had made all my friends and so on. But then like also the Italian guy Andrea said, like, it's nice to start a European movement out of the US, but like you can't grow it. You can't really mean it and build it. And so I think the moment when I decided to go back to Berlin was the moment when it was clear to me that this is going to be a real thing.
Okay. And then, because you have to get used to this, I jumped from question to question, so speed on
Completely
purpose.
fine for me.
I have a long list for you. And then this movement became a party. How do you, by the way, register a party and then in every country? Because you told me you can't be a European party, you still have to be a local party at the end.
Yeah, it's quite sad because under the European treaties, European parties are actually foreseen, but we didn't really implement them. Yeah? So there are these, like, technically there are European parties, but they're not allowed to run on national, local, regional levels. So they're not really, and they're also not allowed to run for the European Parliament elections. So it doesn't really make sense. Yeah, there's something a bit different from what we understand of a party. And so, yeah, we had to basically register legally in all the different countries. I mean, before the elections, we did it in 8 countries. And so we ran out of 8 countries for the European Parliament elections. Now we have around 16, I think. I would have to check. And how this works is very different. In Germany, it's quite simple. You need around 60 people, and then you can basically, go and register at the Bundeswahlleiter, at the electoral office if you want. And then you can get registered as a Freie Wähler, basically a party, and then you can run for elections. But in other countries, it's different. In Portugal, we needed 5,000 signatures to be able to be a party. And to register for the European Parliament elections was also very different. Like in Italy, we couldn't run because we would have needed 150,000 signatures given in front of a notary. And just to get an idea, that would mean that you get, like a notary on the piazza and like a lot of different cities. You drag this person to.
That's very Corona unfriendly, by the way.
Very Corona unfriendly, yeah. But it's very innovation unfriendly. So the barriers to entry in democracy are extremely high in many countries. And I think it's something that we actually have to change, because I think new ideas are good. And just the idea also for the existing parties that they have to perform well, or otherwise there will be, new ideas coming up, I think this is important. And these new ideas cannot be just driven by money and power, but just by people who actually want to do it. Yeah.
I like the summary. The barriers to entry democracy are way too high, especially for this. Let's take a jump. And now you got elected. Now you're a member of the parliament. You're on your own, but you joined the fraction of the Green parties. Just for curiosity, why this fraction? Because Green is on one hand super futuristic, and on the other hand, it's very often associated with not digital, with not innovation friendly, especially in Germany.
So what I realized quite early on, before even the elections, is that in the European Parliament, you're irrelevant if you're not part of a faction. Yeah? And in my movement, there were many people who said, let's just be independent. We just do our thing. We are not the same as the others. We are an actual European party, so let's not be in any faction. And then I said, look, the issue is, if we do that, we cannot deliver on any of the promises we made, like none of the electoral promises we will be able to deliver on, because we will be irrelevant. And that was the first discussion we had with everyone across Europe. So, but people understood that quite fast. And then, I mean, who do you join? Yeah, there's the EPP, which is basically the Conservatives, European People's Party. And they have people like Orban in their ranks, as we know. Yeah, so the CDU and Orban's party Fidesz sit together in this party. So we were like, this is the old past. It's like really not what we want at all. This is anti-European party and so on. Then the Social Democrats, I mean, they also have quite weird parties among them, and are also a bit like the past for us in a way. So they didn't really fit to us. And then there's the far left and the far right, and both were not really interesting for us.
Liberals?
Yeah, and then there's exactly the Liberals and the Greens. And with both, I negotiated very clearly, saying like, okay, look, we want certain committees so we can do what we want to do. First one is the Constitution Committee, so I can actually change Europe in its constitution, which is basically the main issue that Volt is about, fixing the EU. Because there's a lot of stuff that we could talk about that's not working so well. And the second one being, I want to work on migration and asylum. So I want to be in the Interior Committee, and the third one being I want to work for sustainable and digital and competitive economy, and therefore I wanted to be in the Industrial Committee. And this was where my demands, like give me these 3 committees and I'll join you, Liberals or Greens. And so the Liberals were a bit unclear, to be honest, in how to do that. And also I would have been, how do you say that, in the hierarchy below the FDP in a way, because the Nicolas Baer would have been my spokesperson in that group. And the anyways, that would have been a fact.
So the hierarchy is a little bit more flatter with the green ones. So you don't have to report the sub one, you're directly
exactly. In the Greens, I'm basically seen as my own delegation. And so I'm allowed to basically be part of all the delegation leadership meetings.
And did you get those 3? Because you told me you're also in the budget committee, which is a very important one.
Exactly. So that's a good point. I got the 3. And so we voted across Europe, and basically I joined the Greens. And then I saw that there's an empty seat in the budget committee that I could potentially get. And so I was back then with Johannes, who's one of my advisors, and he said, budget, that's where the money is decided. That's where actual politics are being made. If we can get it, let's get in. And so we got it, and we from the beginning took responsibility for a file. So basically an instrument of the European Union that is called the Eurozone budget. It's something that Macron presented, saying hey, we don't only need the ECB, the European Central Bank, to react to all these crises that are happening by lowering the interest rate, but we also need to invest money via an instrument of fiscal policy, if you want. And that's something I worked on. And that also explains why later on I'm now in this role that you mentioned in the beginning of being really in the core of the recovery program.
I already feel we could have a whole talk about Europe and how to work there. I have so many questions like how is it different, but we have, and I promised the audience to talk a little bit about data and AI today too. So let's jump first in the question about the importance of data. And the example I thought about, ownership of data plays a role. For example, I drive a car. The data which is produced, who is the owner? Is it the car producer, the operating system of the car driver, the car owner, the insurance company, the infrastructure one? And there's so many parties involved. And where are we legally, for example, standing today, and what is there? So let's talk a little bit about data.
Yeah, just maybe as a little disclaimer. Yeah, so since I'm part of the Industrial Policy Committee, I'm especially interested in industrial data, and also obviously that connects to what you're saying, which is also if you're in the car, there's also a relation to personal data, I guess. Very often it goes back to that, but. My first and primary objective is to understand how we can increase data sharing within the industrial sector, if you want, with not a direct focus on personal data.
So what that's fine. Industrial data it's less privacy issue. It's a little bit, it's easier. So for me, data is the most important part of the ecosystem which we have. It's like capital, which you need for capitalism. It's like oil we need as an energy source. I mean, it's involved everywhere, but it's still, how do you say, still abstract. What I realized is the European Union came out very late within data strategy, in contrast to China, United States under Obama, etc. They were a little significant earlier. Israel, they were earlier. European Union has no AI strategy yet, just the white paper. So what I read is the data strategy is the core thing and AI is just the application on top. And that's how they view it. Some others say AI is the core thing and data feeds into it. They see difference. So what's your view on the importance of data versus AI, and what is the core, what is the master plan of the European Commission behind this?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the easy answer is it's all connected. How would you train your AI algorithm, if you don't have the data to do that? So that's a bit, I think, the view I have. Just to trace it back a bit in history. So when I entered Parliament, that was July 2nd last year. And then the whole process started of getting a commission together, where basically then von der Leyen finally came out. And from the beginning, it was pretty clear that Margrethe Vestager, who we all know because she starts suing Google and Apple, and now actually just lost some cases of that. But anyways, she was clear that she would be there, and she was already starting to work a bit on an AI white paper, as you said.
Did she switch position?
So she got more power, if you
More
want.
power.
So she's still the commissioner for competition, but she's also now, she got increased in her rank and is now executive vice president for Europe in the digital age. So Europe fit for the digital age. So that's basically, she's like
I have to switch, I think, for this. There we go. So now we speak about this human. And just remember this, because I have a very nice one for the end. It's an analogy to Star Wars, so everyone out there can look for how this looks in Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, I would be so happy it would be in Star Wars, you know, like when you float in the thing, you have like these magnified voices. Anyways, would be super cool. So she's like if you want, the top digitalization person in the EU. So she started with
Which
her
is great,
resort.
finally, because I always said we don't have a vision and we didn't have leadership for this. So it means someone who has the willpower to do something took responsibility, finally.
Yes, I think so. And she's strong. I mean, honestly, she's good. She's smart. She's fast, and she has a strong vision. So I think, I hope that she can push, our slow EU to do some good stuff there. But then, so Macron sent in a woman first as a commissioner and said, like, I want this person to be the commissioner for the internal market. And the parliament basically stopped her because she had some, like income issues as a MEP before, blah, blah. It doesn't really matter. But so the interior market commissioner was coming in quite late. And then the guy is called Thierry Breton, and he's a French guy sent by Macron, basically. And he said when he came, I have industry experience, I have data experience. I believe we don't only need an AI strategy, but we also need this data strategy. So it's really, I think, up to him that we have this now, which is really cool, because I agree with him, as I said in the beginning. How are you going to train your algorithm if you don't have the data?
Breton, right?
Yeah, Breton. So, and in the white paper, maybe just to quickly summarize what's in there for the AI strategy, basically Westerheide says, we need there is a perceived lack of regulation for AI. And I don't want all the member states like France, Germany, Sweden, blah, blah, to regulate that themselves. And then we have, again, like this destruction of the digital common market, if you want. And it makes it hard for startups, for SMEs, for like big companies to understand what the AI regulation is in each of the different markets, and will stop us from innovating. But I want a common framework. And the framework she proposed is very simple. It's basically, let's regulate AI based on the infringements on on fundamental rights.
Yes, so, it's like level 1 to 5, and they only want to regulate the highest level, which has a certain risk level, which is not defined.
Exactly. And but personally, I think the idea makes sense. You say my Spotify. So if my Spotify account discriminates me and sends me only country music, I mean, that's not really going against my fundamental rights. It's a bit annoying, but like, it's a faulty algorithm. But
But if the algorithm would select you based on your gender or your race profile in an interview process, maybe.
Exactly. And that's where you go up the ladder of fundamental rights. I would say at the top, we have autonomous weapon systems, I guess, who would do that, or like jurisdictional, decisions being made by AIs or something like that. And then a bit further, but still, I think in the highest category, as you said, is HR processes, HR selection processes.
But this is a good question, because I'm involved in the BDI, which is the largest industry lobbying group here in Germany, in the how we react, and they had one question. What do you define? Because no one wants to be in level 5, everyone wants to be below. Let's imagine HR process is level 5. On the same level like autonomous weapons from the class. That means a lot of startups out there, whoever works with HR, they are now under a new set of regulation. And this will be a very interesting discussion. Do you have some perception if Europe will give clearer guidelines, or if we have to figure this out on ourselves? With we, I mean on national level?
So the white paper is basically an invitation for consultation. Yeah? It basically means, I think that there's something that we need to look at. Here's an idea what the direction could be. And now
they got hundreds of recommendations. I think it was 168 just long. I mean, a lot of people sent feedback to this. And I think this is, by the way, a beautiful process. Not perfect. It's not digital enough. But I think it's great to ask for feedback and build this in so everyone can lobby. Doesn't matter how big they are.
I fully agree, and I think the direction is right. You know, whether the 5 categories are the right ones and whether we should differentiate more is a good question. And we also should see, you know, if we have 5 categories, what kind of regulation do we put next to it? Because I don't think you should only regulate the highest one, but you could say the highest one I forbid if it's autonomous weapon systems. If the second one, the second highest, if there were more categories, is something you say like, I only allow this for licensed algorithms. Yeah, and so you need to get a license to be able to do that. That could be, I mean, that's a typical way to regulate. You know, if it's a high risk kind of environment, and then you could go down saying like, here at least you have to have transparency on the algorithm, it's like, or on the data set that is underlying it, so that you can see it's not discriminatory and so on. And you can go down the list until no regulation whatsoever.
In the virtual chat with a member of the German parliament, Thomas Heilmann, we discussed this. He proposed, I call due diligence. So you have at a certain level, you have a due diligence process, like you have it with data to do and with your balance sheet, etc. end of the year. And that gives you maybe a license or not. And that means if you're classified somewhere there will be a process. Either it's register only, or you're free, or you have to actively need a license for this. That also could mean that, for example, Google and Facebook could maybe apply for a license, means they come under even more stricter European law to be controlled.
Absolutely. I think when it comes to algorithms and AI, that would be the case then. I think that's exactly the idea, that you try to create a framework which is precise enough, but still simple enough for everyone to understand.
Are you involved a little bit in this? Do you have influence?
So the AI strategy is still in a very early phase. As you said, it's in consultation phase, and we have to see what kind of regulation comes out of it. But I could imagine, so I mean, you have different committees in the European Parliament. So for example, there's the jurisdictional, the URI committee, which works on all things legal, if you want. And then there is the Interior Market Committee, and I think, and the LIBE Committee, which is the Interior Security Committee, if you want. So they all will have a role in this. And the Industrial Policy Committee, which I'm part of,
will have a role too.
But it's more about, you know, how do you help industry to get to a place where they can use AI more? How do you help industry to get to a place where they, you know, share data more? So it's less on the regulatory framework.
I just asking because I want that startups under a certain size are not regulated, because it's too much hassle. If you start an AI company, you have to fill out pages of pages before. So this is a critical thing.
Can I say one thing to this?
Please.
Because I mean, just when we started Volt, I think midway the GDPR kicked in, and so we lost half of our subscription base. Because I mean, I tried to call in a GDPR lawyer at that time, and he said yeah, it's just 6,000 a day, it's fine. And I mean, we had absolutely no money. So I do know how shitty for a small startup kind of organization, not unclear, regulation is. It's really bad. It can destroy your business model, and it can really harm you because you don't have the funds to, afford these lawyers that. Exactly, that goes back to the green fields or green forests, but it can really harm you. And so I think whatever kind of regulation is being put out there, we need to make sure that it doesn't have these harming effects, because it's explained extremely clearly and you get free legal advice or something like this. But on the other hand, GDPR is quite a success for me, because it just instantiated the rule that basically you own your data. It's a simple philosophy, but I think it is there, and that is a huge success that actually has had effects all across Europe, because we have a united kind of way to look at it, but also across the world in terms of privacy standards. And so I think we have to somehow, if we regulate, take the good sides of putting something like you own your data in there, but without having these this huge unclarity about what this regulation means for small businesses.
This leads me to the polls. On the one hand, please fill out the poll, because I asked you who's owning the data. And then this leads me to the background I have here, which means for me, it's all about an ecosystem. And I just purchased a lot of wood, so I'm playing with this ecosystem idea too. And we humans are always just trying to regulate everything, but at the end it needs to nurture itself and grow. So for me, the role of government is to build an ecosystem. Let's say for AI, let's say provide the framework, the funding, the infrastructure, and then provide everything which is needed, but it has to grow in itself. I think the government should not start companies. Yes, it should not own them and should not build them. It should help them to grow and protect them from outside, from everything which could harm them because they are too small. So, which comes to me, my feeling from reading the data strategy is that Europe wants to build its own ecosystem, which means it's a digital fortress or walled garden or however you want to describe it, but it will be closer to what not US yet, but China is doing, means that's our internet. That's our data, our cloud space, our infrastructure, our rules. If you play here, you play after our rules. Is this just my interpretation, or do you see this too?
I see this too, and here's also where I disagree to an extent with like what's being done. So if you look at the data strategy, I think they very clearly state the issues. You know, like we need to. I mean, a lot of companies are not sharing data. There's a mentality issue. There is like also like a collection of data issue. There's a standardization issue. There's a certificate. I mean, there's many issues that are well defined in this data strategy. But when it comes to solutions, first of all, it makes me a bit nervous, maybe because of my background in private sector consulting, where everything needs to be, boxes. But it's not clear how the solutions are connected to the issues that are being mentioned, and that's the first thing that makes me a bit nervous. But okay, it's forgivable. But the bigger issue is that I think the question of sovereignty and competitiveness are mixed. Is it about European competitiveness or is it about European sovereignty? And they're different concepts. Yeah. So if you talk about sovereignty, you talk about security of your data. Yeah? So you talk about maybe third party actors, could be countries like the US with their Cloud Act and so on, being able to like take your data. So that could be something that you are afraid of, and then you would have to shield yourself against that. And there could be regulations to do that. There could be the question of cybersecurity attacks and basically hacking of your data, and all these issues or like you could be talking about your critical infrastructure. You define the internet as a critical infrastructure, and you feel that you need to physically safeguard, this infrastructure to an extent and shield it off. But these are questions of they don't go hand in hand with competitiveness, because you're basically saying, I need a fortress, as you said. I need to be. I have a certain level of autarky, of autonomous.
Like we have water and electricity. So internet should be like those three, like air, which we can't limit that much, and that should be either an ownership of regulated European companies or state-owned, maybe like some water pipes and all the systems is, or like the roads in some countries.
Exactly, and you're saying exactly the right thing. Like for these topics of critical infrastructure, we kick out Huawei, and we are careful, and we want to be like everything in European hands because we don't trust the outside world. Yeah, but I think this narrative is also dangerous to an extent, because I mean, if you talk about competitiveness, if you're a small company right now and you want to digitize, for example, some part of your manufacturing, I mean, which kind of competitive?
Alibaba, Google, I need Amazon Cloud. These are the first, especially Alibaba, for example, the first companies I would recommend you to work with if you're working with data and upgrading your industry. And there are non-German I can recommend. There are non-Europeans I can recommend. The Americans have a huge head start, technology-wise.
And I think there you have it. The question is, if to be able to digitize and to actually share data, currently you would recommend people to use these providers from outside, then if you forbid these providers, you decrease your digitization.
That is a problem. That's a problem I haven't solved yet for myself too, intellectual.
But the issue is like, why do you mind that there is an American provider, like, I mean, Google, Amazon, and Microsoft currently providing cloud space?
My answer? Taxes. If they would pay fair taxes and they pay a fair share, what they earn here, they are fine. I mean, it's like we can buy foreign cars too. That's not a problem. If they comply with regulation and it's a foreign company, I don't care. I just want that they pay their taxes here because we need the money. And what I'm really pissed off is they don't. And that's not only their problem, that's a lot of other corporations do the same. And that's also European, Dublin and Luxembourg problem and so forth.
And there, but I love that you say that, because it's, it's clear. You say they should pay the taxes, and I 100% agree. And so let's write regulation that makes everyone pay their fair share. Yeah. So that's absolutely, I'm with you. I have another issue. If the competition is bad, then the prices would increase and people would be locked in with certain cloud providers, for example, especially if there's no interoperable, no interoperability between the different providers. And then obviously it gets worse when you go from infrastructure as a service up to platform as a service and so on. Then, but and that's something I think we should regulate as well. I think we should strongly regulate that there has to be interoperability. I think all public contracts that are being signed should force cloud service providers to increase interoperability between others, so that it really is just one push on a button and you can go to another
open API, the possibility to change your cloud provider and don't lose your data.
Exactly. And I mean, I've talked to a range of companies and they said the core services provided by by the big cloud providers are the same, and then yes, there are specialized services, and obviously you can't ask someone to transfer data and the learnings from algorithms and so on to another, let's say, technical world where they don't exist because you're the only one offering that. That's fine. But at least for the core of the cloud services, I think we need to ensure that there's interoperability, and we need to fight for that. And this is stuff I love talking about, because this is, helping businesses reduce transaction costs, ensuring that there's no lock-in, ensuring that, you have the best service available, that there's competition amongst the cloud service providers. But what I don't think is fair is to say, I don't like American companies. Because, I mean, we are so interconnected with the States. The fact that we believe that it's okay to, say, I don't like US-based companies as a whole in general, I think is not the way Europe works. We always say everyone who adheres to our regulation, and you said that, who pays taxes, who, supports our privacy laws, who is in line with everything, should be able to operate here. I don't care where you come from.
I agree. I will continue to use Google and Amazon because they provide a significant better service and for a better price. The second thing, which annoys me, it's taxes, because regulation you can fix privacy issues, taxes. And second is, I hate that the Americans are spying on us in that scale.
Yes.
It's like they do it, and it might be, it's assumption, easier for them to use existing American platforms for their political interest, like the Chinese do it. The moment I use Alibaba, I know that this is transparent data and it will feed into my social store. And, I know it feeds in there. Whatever I buy and purchase on Amazon, I assume that it doesn't feed into everything, but at least NSA, I assume, will check it. And this pisses me off too, that I feel unprotected. I feel like everyone can read me, and the European Union is not standing clear and saying, hey, we protect the interests of our citizens, at least that they're not spied on that scale anymore.
I fully agree. I think there is very interesting due diligences made by, the Commission, but also by big companies trying to understand, where am I sure that no data package leaves the European soil, and I think that's a super interesting and a worthy kind of exercise. And I mean, if that means that some of these companies, because they are under the Cloud Act, obliged to give data to the US government, then maybe we need to say, look, then you need to split the legal entity, and then you have to be here and ensure that you are here and can legally ensure that the data doesn't leave
so that's
this continent.
We will have a European Google and European Amazon and European Facebook maybe. And then they will work out how they say, okay, but we have one algorithm, how do we feed it and so forth. But at the end, they need to, they need to split and build entities.
I think the good thing is, I don't think we need to, already say how they need to do it. We just need to tell them, you need to do it. So if I, as a...
That's very politician. Yes, you have to do it. I don't care how you do it.
No, but I think it's very true because I mean I think for many services, for example Spotify, maybe I don't mind if the data. Maybe that goes a bit back to the risk framework that we were doing earlier. Maybe I don't mind too much, but especially when it comes to public data or individual data, so public sector data that is maybe very secret, or like individual data, maybe I want to have the right to say I don't want my data to leave this country, and I don't want my company's data. I want to be sure that if I save this data in the cloud, maybe it's hosted by Amazon, but
the American government or other governments are not able to access it.
Exactly. And I mean, there are these solutions already offered by Google, by Amazon, and by Microsoft, which say your data is, basically physically stored on our servers in Frankfurt or somewhere. Or you can also say, I store my data
they have to do
myself.
It under GDPR even, or? I mean, it doesn't say GDPR, the European data is not allowed to be stored outside of Europe?
So I think you can basically admit to your data being stored outside, but I'm not like a perfect expert on GDPR, but I think the issue here is more when it comes to GDPR that if a country is equivalent in their data privacy laws, we allow this country to take our data as well, and that's the huge battle that the EU and the states currently have on the data shield and the question of whether US law is as tough as GDPR. So I think that's a huge political fight that will continue to come. But I mean, just like maybe to summarize, Amazon can host your, it can manage your cloud even though you say you have your own servers where it's safe. Yeah, that is a feasible technical solution already and very standardized possible. So the only thing that we want to ensure is that whatever learnings Amazon takes from the data that it manages for you, that first obviously doesn't take the data itself and takes it out of your server somewhere else, and also that the learnings that it can generate from your data is not, transferred without your consent to governments, the US government or other companies in the US. I think that's the rule.
We have one question from the audience. Which reads, do all European countries have the same understanding of A, the importance of data, and B, furthermore, the practical and moral view and ownership of data differ from members? This leads me to the following question, a little bit the political. I heard that Vestager is driving the AI strategy, but Breton is driving the data strategy, which are a little bit different. So it's a little bit power play maybe there, and then you have all the national states, and some say, hey, we care about data, and others say, I don't care that much. What is your feeling like how the power plays and how the national levels, who's the driver for a stronger sovereign and competitive system versus I don't care?
So I think in all countries, as I see, there's a perceived lack of regulation when it comes to AI, and also when it comes to data, and when it comes to sovereignty on data, and also competitiveness. So I think a lot of countries are currently like building their strategies in this aspect, and that's why I think it's so important that we do it on a European level, as I said, also because I mean the worst case scenario is we have diverging routes across Europe. I think that could really harm all our businesses to a large extent, and so I think we really need to make sure that this works well. The power play between the commissioners is not so much of an issue because I think they add to each other very well. Like the AI regulation makes sense. The framework that she's putting forward is a risk framework, and it makes sense. But and the data strategy is much more like, okay, let's make the data available. Let's push for that. I think there's some countries which are really running ahead. I mean, I went to Sweden, obviously a huge forerunner, if you want, avant-garde of how to do that well. They have a regionalized AI strategy, which is something that I'm also pushing for in Europe. So you basically say, okay, we know in Groningen we have a healthcare university and we have some healthcare companies. So let's make the area of Groningen an AI focus on healthcare, on health data and health sector, if you want, and push, what they do is they give money for projects so that companies can come together with universities. They do something which I love, which is legal clinics. So they give you a range of GDPR lawyers and data lawyers so that you have basically the knowledge of what that means and how to implement that and how to share data with each other in a legally compliant way. And they just make this, a clear priority.
So
and
is
I
it
think
like
this is something.
a competence center? So they provide access to network, a little bit of capital, and that's how they attract talent and more capital and companies?
Exactly.
And
So I think
and that leads
you
me
go.
to the question. I mean, Europe is now spending big money, 700 billion, 750 billion. How will we in the AI industry at the end can benefit from this? Like, what are means for Europe to really support an ecosystem like behind me? Regulation is clear, but how can they give financial incentives and what are good means to distribute the money?
Yeah. So there's positive and negative news on this. Yeah. So the negative news is that the EU has a program which is called Digital Europe, and it's a really cool program to push digitization across the EU. But while on the one hand we have like this huge recovery package with the 750 billion that you said now set up, and I can explain a bit how that will work. We also have the 7-year budget of the EU and where this Digital Europe program is in. And there, the heads of state cut a lot in the last meeting that they had a week ago or
By the
so.
way, is this the predecessor or the following after Horizon 2020?
No, Horizon has its own basically follow up, and that's more for research and innovation. Okay. Digital Europe is its own. I think it's actually a part of Horizon. I have to check this again. Sorry, but it's basically its own like legislative act. And is really focused on pushing for AI, for digitization, and so on. But so there's some negative news on money being cut currently, and we from Parliament will try to push that up again. And I'm already trying to do that with some other people. But then there is the recovery package, and this is the 750 billion. And here, the majority of the money is given out in a very weird process. Yeah. So basically, Europe borrowed 750 billion from the financial markets, directly secured, or will borrow, but directly secured with the EU budget as a collateral, if you want.
Question: Who will sell the money? Like, who will give us the money? Is it pension funds or a central bank?
So, like treasuries on the German level, like normal government bonds, if you want. They will be given out, I think, to a series of buyers in the basically first.
So Germany is giving out bonds and then gives this money to the EU?
No. So I think I want to say it's a similar system as German treasuries work. Yeah, right. Bonds work, if you want. Yeah. So, and now it's only happening on the EU level, which obviously has a very high credit rating because you have all the different countries and the insurance, factor comes in.
So it's like the Eurobond we never wanted to have.
It is exactly that. It's so funny how the debate changed and how Eurobonds are just not being mentioned anymore.
Right.
But it's exactly that. I think the positive thing that comes out of it is that the idea is to channel this money through instruments in the EU, and not just transfer it to a member state. I think with Eurobonds, a lot of people thought, oh, okay, now countries can just indebt themselves further and just be secured by the EU as a whole. And that's something I also don't think is a good idea. But what is a good idea is to say we are in a huge pandemic, we are in a huge crisis. Not only do people lose their lives, but also the economy is going down really rapidly and might for a longer period of time. And we have to understand that we have to get out of this together, and not only the rich Germany, helping Lufthansa and being happy, but also
process. European borrowing 750 billion. How is this now distributed to companies, NGOs, or is it governments? Like, who's receiving the money and how do you get it?
Okay, so basically it's borrowed, then it's by a technical process pushed into some programs of the EU budget, and the main new program that is being set up is called the Recovery and Resilience Facility. So around 75% of the money are being spent via this. And how this works is there's an allocation key of how much each country can ask for, and then they write their national recovery and resilience plan and can just basically write whatever they want into this plan. and then they go to the commission and say, hey, we want this money for this plan. Do you think that's okay? And so far in the regulation, there's not so much written. And it says you need to, your national plan needs to be green and digital. But I'm not so trusting in that, because if you look in the annex, and that's, I mean, where the legislative work comes in, you can see that they don't really make this criteria very biting. Yeah? So I'm not sure at the moment if a country comes in and says, you know, I spend €1 on digital stuff and €1 on green stuff, on greening, you know, our economies, and 98 on coal industry, that they wouldn't be able to approve it under the current, how the regulation is currently written. So what I'm trying to fight for is very simple minimum spending targets. So I say there should be 3 priorities for this European money. First is digital, second, green transformation, and third, resilience. So that could include healthcare resilience and, I mean, yeah, basically making our administrations more resilient to shocks. And you should spend at least 25% of, I mean, when you hand in your plan, you should show that 25% of your plan is spending on green, 25% is on resilience, 25% is on.
So you go in, you say there need certain thresholds, the criteria, you have to spend it, so you don't spend it just on building tanks because you want to have a defense spending, but to make it green, sustainable, and digital for the future. By the way, I think this is also what VOLT stands for, right? Digital and sustainable and green, like.
Yeah, very much. I mean, that's exactly our line. I think we have like this weird element of fixing the EU, obviously, as an additional thing.
It has to, because the first people already asked for the shirt in the chat, and I purchased it on Redbubble. Who wants to just give in Citizen of Europe, and you will get it in your size. I think we should have more of those. Another question for you, because time is limited. We have 8 minutes left, and Florian Bötsch asked following: if you legislate the companies that have to split into 2 entities, yes, let's say Facebook is a Google one and American one to comply with law. How do you ensure that they won't offer different services? And as a European consumer, will I be obliged to use the service of European company instead of, let's say, the American part of it? Maybe US companies would reward European customers to sign up directly with them so that they get more data. That's an interesting thought, by the way. So Google says, hey, our Google's way better if you use Google America and not Google Germany.
It's a super good question. That's why I didn't want to jump the gun and say, you know, we need to split these companies to be able to fulfill the regulation. I mean, my hope would be that the US understands that it's better to comply to, like some form of EU standards when it comes to privacy, so that like these companies don't are not forced to share their data with the FBI or like the CIA or whoever, or NSA, but that they actually, you know, can secure us that they are independent. It could also just be sufficient that they somehow find ways to say, look, the data is stored in Germany or in Europe, and we don't even have access, dear American government, to the data itself as of the technical setup of this, because we can actually monitor that there are no data packages leaving
because the can measure it.
Yeah, exactly. So my hope would be that we can come to such a solution where basically maybe they can manage data without having the need to actually have access to it from
all the technical people here will say, hey, I need to train the algorithms, I need the data for this. That will be something tricky to solve, but companies will emerge to solve this. I had a thought which I have lost now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good like the thing is, I think we should acknowledge that this is complex, and that's why I didn't like the data strategy so much. I jumped to the conclusion, let's build it all from a German, European, whatever, French perspective. We just built our own Google, we built our own Facebook, we built our own cloud service provider, also with a bit of a status view as the government. You know, like when the government, and you said this earlier, when the government thinks, the EU or any government thinks that they can build like an Amazon or like Amazon Web Services or like something like this, I just get very nervous. Like the idea of being able to reproduce a European cloud service provider completely on our own and make this available for public use is just something where I get a bit nervous from my private sector, and maybe then at that aspect also a bit liberal kind of.
So I sum her up a little bit. First, Europe has a huge data market. I think it's, as some would say, it's the oil of the 21st century. It's a little bit different than oil, but it is a richness which we have, which means like Saudi Arabia emerged with this wealth, we can use this wealth too. It's huge and it's brilliant and we have to use it. Good as Europe wants to regulate it for our protection, we still have the unclear questions of sovereignty, like protection versus competitiveness, where it means open market. EU wants to just set boundaries so that we don't have too much fragmented regulation at the local level, but on the local level we want to have regional adaptation, like you gave with the example of Sweden. So there we still have, like in Eastern Europe, which is lagging behind, and we have Western France, Germany, and the Nordics, which are a little bit faster. This will still, it's still open. Yes, everyone can get involved there. What else we have to mention there? And by the way, yes, the 750 billion, I can't apply for it. Only my government can apply for it.
That's a pretty good summary. And I mean, as always, like it's complex. It's the EU is a big animal, but I do believe that it's quite important that we fight also in these big animals. And that brings me back to my original point on, join a political party, not a right-wing one if possible, but like join a political party to ensure that all these decisions are not only taken by, people who don't know so much about digital policy. I mean, I'm also like at least I know some, I know Python, so at least I have some access to it. But I think it's really important that we understand that these decisions are super important for our future and are being taken in politics by politicians in the Star Wars background that you're currently doing by the Imperium or whatever it is.
The
and so
Galactic
I think
Empire emerged after this. That's the problem.
Yeah, so I think it's really important to get active in politics, to make it short. Bring your expertise and your ideas and get active.
Oh, I mean, history or future, it's a thing. The European Union is the closest which we have to the Galactic Senate. Yes, because a lot of local member states or planets are there. We all know about the strengths and the weaknesses. Yes, we know how it can play out. I give a clear call for, hey, check out Volt. It's not I don't say vote them, but go out there and check them out, because it's one of the freshest ideas which we have there on the market. Yes, for political activity. I say get political active. If you're not, that's at least vote, please. Always vote. And second, try to do something, because this is too important for us, and if we don't get active, we can't change anything. Well, and then I would say, any call to action from your side?
No, I fully underwrite what you said. Become part of the Galactic Senate and help us change this so that basically the European model becomes the a positive example of how we can live in a society that is sustainable, that is digital and fair.
And my thought, take out your passport and look what's on the top, because my passport says European Union, and then it says Bundesrepublik Deutschland. So our European Union is already there. If you say, oh no, Germany's no, European Union is the most important, which we have to protect. And then comes our regional. It's Berlin or it's Frankfurt or it's Paris. Wherever you feel home, that's what we have. But don't put too much emphasis on your national state, because the national state is in between, and European Union is already there. We can't see it. And I tell you, Brexit, the British, they will suffer from this. And they maybe have earned it, and they will come back, hopefully, because they are part of us.
I hope they come back too.
Wonderful. Damian, I thank you. I have shared your contact details there. Else, your Twitter, your webpage, and your LinkedIn profile, I will share it with everyone after via email. So thank you for coming in. You will be there again for the summit, which we have 16th and 17th of November. Then you will talk a little bit more. It's half a year how the European market looks like, and then we will have also more maybe physical interaction. It will be hybrid, streaming plus physical being there. So I'm looking forward to this.
Me too. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you. Do I want to finish with the Galactic Empire, because it's Galactic Senate, ending them into let me see if I have something more optimistic. Yes. That's a little bit more optimistic. We're still on Earth. So, that was today about, well, we spoke a lot of insights about how European Union works, what they're up to. I learned a lot. I think you learned a lot. I want to point out for the next virtual chat, which is next week, same time, very interesting topic. It's Dr. Ulrike Franke, who's a policy advisor on the European level, but it's more an NGO. And we speak about the future of warfare. So we will speak about what Damian has mentioned about the level of to be regulated services. What do we have there? How is China, United States, Russia, what do they have out there? How is the law here? What can we expect? How will war be in future? Good news is less people die from years to years because of autonomous war. We speak about drones, so the whole topic will be touched. I think this is a topic we do not speak often enough, and it's often ignored in Germany. But if we look, for example, France, it's one of the key pillars of the AI strategy, which is national defense and security strategy. We Germany don't do it, but we are here European, we are global. I think this will be highly interesting. So next week, you can register as usual with a link which will be shared here in the chat, or you go on riseofai/virtual chat, register for free. I will also announce next week the next 4 virtual chats which we have. I have done the planning until September. A lot of interesting will come up to. Excited, we will have 16 in total then. And it was a pleasure as usual. I will see you next week. Have a great day.